Responding to the global crisis in education, the IIIT has initiated its Advancing Education in Muslim Societies project to identify and address issues that will develop and enhance the teaching and learning experience. Recognizing complexity and multidimensionality of the task, the IIIT is undertaking a research work plan focused on offering policymakers and educators evidence-based and data-driven information concerning education in Muslim societies. The AEMS project aspires to provide effective research and means to develop students into becoming knowledgeable, empowered, and productive by instilling in them values and morals that contribute to the betterment of their societies and humanity at large.
AEMS starts with the premise that the purpose of education is not only utilitarian, but also for specific civic engagements and human development, individually and socially. The dissemination of our programs will include venues such as policy recommendations, consulting, and strategic engagement with system of education in Muslim societies, in addition to our publication and translation programs and also our teaching programs through Fairfax Institute. AEMS 30 Space is rooted in human tradition, Eastern and Western thought. It's also based on values derived initially from the Islamic tradition and sources, and that's the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. This approach provides authenticity and diversity at the same time, spanned across disciplines of human knowledge. What differentiates AEMS from other educational reform initiatives, in addition to all of the above, is it is data-driven and empirical research approach.
I am helping to develop the research methodology, some of the sampling decisions, and a lot of the research constructs that will help us start with a wave of data collection to assess from the ground up how young people in Muslim societies fall along scales of emotional and social literacy and what schools are doing, both in the private sector and the public sector, to address this.
So while developing the programs for Muslim societies, educational programs and curricula, we have to really take into consideration what these societies need, and at the same time connect to that which is going to resonate with their living traditions. And this is what is often lacking in many of educational reform programs, is that they do not have good understanding of that history and what really resonates with people's inner feelings and their own spirituality. And on some level, these have to be connected. And that's what we are trying to do through AEMS at IIIT.
AEMS identifies its research within the so-called third space, which means that education serves more than just acquiring knowledge and skills. It also serves as a vehicle for a meaningful and holistic life. Based on this framework, education functions as a means for transformation and hope for a better future. An in-depth literature review reveals a wealth of information and programs on education for employment and citizenship in Muslim societies. However, there is a lack of research on the social, emotional, and spiritual aspects of the individual in the third space.
The motivation for the Advancing Education in Muslim Societies project has multiple levels, of course, but one of the major trends that we see in global education reform is that almost all initiatives that come into predominantly Muslim societies from the West are focused either on education for citizenship or on education for economic development. And we've come to think of those as the first and the second spaces around education reform. And we feel that what's missing from that is the third space, which is beyond the first and second spaces, also includes them, but is a space that understands that education is not only utilitarian, but also transformative, that education is to help young people have a meaningful life, which includes all kinds of elements that go above and beyond only work or citizenship.
We are now so set on focusing on how an education will result in someone getting a job that we've forgotten that education is central to the human being. And that's what makes the third space and our focus within AEMS on it so important. We believe that children are human beings and are great civic individuals, and education can be a pathway through which they can get a job, they can be great citizens, but they can be great human beings. And this holistic approach to education, we believe, can really transform our societies across the board and make a difference. A lot of the issues that we face across the world can be better dealt with if we have this really holistic approach towards education.
To address the gaps in research, the AEMS team is designing a conceptual framework and a robust research agenda that takes the third space into consideration. Mapping the Terrain, as named by the AEMS team, attempts to investigate the conditions and status of education in Muslim societies while focusing on a person as a whole and more specifically at the social, emotional, and spiritual aspects of his or her well-being. It is about learning to be, where education is not only about knowledge and skills, but also about a human being.
My first research agenda for this project is to focus on mapping the terrain. The goals of mapping the terrain, which means that we're going for an exploratory study. The goals of this is to, one, explore areas of interest that haven't been done or studied before in Muslim societies. Two is to stay within the third space learning to be framework that we identified as an area of interest. And three, to continue with the work that IIIT has been doing for years on exploring thought and knowledge and learning to be, which is part of the holistic approach to human beings. So the idea is that humans, whether they're students, teachers, or adults, have different parts that work together, from the thinking, the head, the thoughts, to the heart, the emotions, and to the hands, which symbolizes behaviors. Mapping the terrain, wave one will focus on 4 constructs that we identified, as I mentioned, based on the research, based on the gaps in studies, and based on the IIIT framework. Those are forgiveness, empathy, community connectedness, and moral reasoning, ethical reasoning.
The International Institute of Islamic Thought is finalizing a partnership with the Indiana University Press to launch a new journal on education in Muslim societies.
One of the outlets that I'm very excited about is a new journal that will be launched in partnership with Indiana University Press called the Journal of Education in Muslim Societies, that will publish 2 issues a year and accept some of the top researchers producing knowledge about education in Muslim societies.
The reason why we've envisioned the Journal of Education in Muslim Societies is that we strongly believe that there needs to be a conversation between academics and practitioners and policymakers. These conversations are critical because if we can have really good research that is fundamental to the work on the ground, to inform practice and policy, it helps us create a transformation that is much needed, not just in Muslim societies, but in education across the field.
AEMS will have several venues for dissemination. The International Institute of Islamic Thought is finalizing a partnership with the Indiana University Press to launch a book series on education in Muslim societies. The book series is published as a part of IIIT's new initiative, Advancing Education in Muslim Societies.
The new book series of AEMS will continue the legacy of IIIT in publication and translation. It will draw from scholars who have been contributing to IIIT scholarship in education. In addition, it will attract new talents that are interested in topics aligned with AEMS research agenda, such as the third space, the learning to be, the constructs and value-based education that we have been initiating in our research department. What's unique about the book series is that it's in partnership with Indiana University, and in the fact that it's refocusing the attention to the socio-emotional learning areas of AEMS and of the research.
In predominantly Muslim societies that are often the targets of external reform and reform initiatives, we feel like this initiative, which comes from within the Muslim community, will also be a better match for what local needs are, and where reform efforts can come from within and from the bottom up, and then share those findings globally. So then in the long run, we also hope to have an influence on global standards and policies that influence ministries of education worldwide, but that those findings and recommendations and policy advice would come from within and would come from research that's grounded in an understanding of local communities' needs.